All right, so we're getting ready to review for a quiz. So I thought I would try using my draw feature on my computer, and because this isn't in a PowerPoint, but I thought that it probably would be helpful if I explained the things to you. So what we're starting here with, the first example is, it says to approximate the following accurate to 3 decimal places. So if you are at home, you probably don't have a calculator like we have at school, but you do have your phone, right? So, and you may have a computer. So I'm just going to type in calculator in my search engine, and I got a calculator up. And what I'm trying to find here is the square root of 206. So what I'm looking for is, on my calculator, I'm looking for a square root here. Does anybody see it? I do not. So then I'm going to hit second, and there I see square root. So what I'm going to do is I'm typing in 206, and then I'm going to say the square root of that. So it says the square root of 6 is 14.353. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write 14.253. That's that answer. The second question says the cubed root of 753, I believe. Yes, 753. So on my calculator, I'm typing 753, and I'm going to do the cubed root. And so I can see the cubed root is right there. So I've got 9.098. So that's 9.098. Now, the other thing you could do, if you can't find your square root or your cube root key, remember you can write the roots as fractions. And so this is really 206 to the 1/2, and this is really 753 to the 1/3. So you could type it in the calculator like that and have 753, and then do this x to the y key and put 1 divided by 3 and close the parentheses, and you'll still get the same answer. It's just a matter of how you type it in. Just a thought, okay? So moving on to our next question, it says simplify the following without a calculator. All right, well, I'm taking this test at home. My teacher's not going to know if I use a calculator or not, and I know that the fifth root of negative 132, or negative 32, is really the same as negative 32 to the 1/5. So my teacher's not watching, so I'm going to type in parentheses 30, oops, clear, I'm not going to type in the parentheses. I'm going to do 32 and make it negative, and I'm going to take that to the parentheses 1 divided by 5. And I got negative 2. Now let's just double check something. Parentheses, 32 negative, close the parentheses, to the parentheses 1 divided by 5. Oops, how did I type 0 divided by 5? I know it's negative 2. Okay, then I have the fourth root of 81. So on my calculator, I've got 81 to the parentheses 1 divided by 4. I got to put it in parentheses because my calculator isn't like the fancy ones at school that knows to do the order of operations, that knows you want it to be an exponent as a fraction. So there's those two answers. Okay? Now it says to simplify the following to an exact value. Well, the first one we're looking for here is square roots. So when we're looking for square roots, we want to find a perfect square that divides evenly into these. Well, a perfect square of 16, so what's the square root of 16? Well, the square root of 16 is 4. What's the square root of x to the 4th? Well, that would be x to the 2nd. What's the square root of y to the 10th? Well, that would be y to the 5th. Because remember, these are the exponents of 1/2. So 4 times 1/2 is 2. 10 times 1/2 is 5. So we've got 4x squared y to the 5th. Now, on the number 3b, we are taking the cubed root. The cubed root. So if I wrote this, I've got negative parentheses, negative 64, x to the 9th, y to the 12th, and that's all to the 1/3 because that's what the cubed root is. Well, the cubed root of negative 64 is negative 4. So I'm just going to come back here and show it to you. So I've got parentheses 64 negative, and that's going to the parentheses 1/3. Gives me negative 4. So I've got negative 4. 9 times 1/3 is x to the 3rd. 12 times 1/3 is 4. So we've got negative 4 x to the 3rd and y to the 4th. Down here it says to evaluate without a calculator. Again, now you could do without a calculator, it just means the cubed root of 64 squared. Or you could type it in the calculator. So I've got 64 to the 2/3. And I got 16. Hello? Oh, sorry about that. So next we have 16 to the negative 3/4. So we can type that in our calculator also, 16, and then x to the y, parentheses, 3 negative divided by 4, and we get a decimal. So that's negative, or excuse me, that's 125. So 0.125. Now I am your math teacher, and I happen to know that that's the same as 1/8. But hey, that's okay. The other reason I happen to know that is 16 to the negative 3/4 means 1 divided by 16, the 4th root of 16 cubed. Well, the 4th root of 16 is 2. 1 divided by 2 cubed. And that is 1/8. Just an FYI. Okay? Now it says to take these last three to an exact value. Exact value means we're going to leave the radicals in there. Okay, so we're going to take this and we're going to leave our radicals there. So the first step is we're trying to find a square root. So we want to think of our perfect squares. 1 is a perfect square. Doesn't help me. 4 is a perfect square. Doesn't help me. 9 doesn't help me. 16 doesn't help me. 25. 25 times 3 is 75. So I break this into the square root. I'm tired of green. Let's go purple. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 25 times 3. Well, what is the square root of 25? Right. Square root of 25 is 5. And we don't know the square root of 3, so it stays there. So there's our exact value. Now the difference between A and B is that in part B we're looking for perfect cubes. So what divides into 16 that is a perfect cube? So if I look at my brain and I say, okay, 1 to the 3rd is 1, that doesn't help me. 2 to the 3rd is 8. 8 goes into 16. 8 times 2. So what's the cubed root of 8? Well, the cubed root of 8 is 2, and then we're left with the 2 that's still under there, so we have the cubed root of 2. Now we're looking for perfect quartics. So we're trying to find a quartic that'll divide into 48. So 1 to the 4th is 1, 2 to the 4th is 16. Hey, 16 times 3. So I have the 4th power, or the 4th root of 16 times 3. The 4th root of 16 is 2, and that leaves me with the 4th root of 3. Oops, sorry, I went too fast there. Alright, so those are our first just simplifying. Then we have the second one here with some simplifying with some variables. So we do the same thing. We break the 50 down. The square root of 50 So the square root of 50 is the square root of 25 times 2. The square root of x to the 5th is x to the 4th times x. And the square root of y to the 7th is y to the 6th times y. So when I take my square roots, the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of x to the 4th is x squared. The square root of y to the 6th is y cubed. And then we have the ugly left over in the square roots. For part B, we've got 200, x to the 4th, y to the 7th, z to the 17th. Well, we're still doing square roots. The square root of 200 is 100 times 2. X to the 4th, that's even, so we can keep it. Y to the 7th, y to the 6th times y. And then z to the 16th times z. Sorry about my handwriting, folks. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of x to the 4th is x squared. Square root of y to the 6th is y to the 3rd. And the square root of z to the 16th is z to the 8th. So that gives us 2yz in the leftovers. Alright, so now we're going to add and subtract. When we add or subtract here, we want to make sure that when we add or subtract, we have the same radical symbols. So none of these have the same radicals. However, 8, the square root of 8, can be changed to the square root of 4 times 2. So we have the square root of 2 plus, and then that gives us 2 square roots of 2. So we have 2 square roots of 2. Minus, then we've got the square root of 32. Well, the square root of 32 is the square root of 16 times 2, which is 4 square roots of 2. So minus 4 square roots of 2. So when we combine like terms, 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 minus 4 is negative 1, so we have negative 1 square roots of 2. And there's our answer. So for part B, we have 2 square roots of 75. Well, the square root of 75 is the square root of 25 times 3. We already said that. So that's 5 square roots of 3. So we're going to come over here and I'm going to change my color so I can tell that it's not the problem we just did. So I'm going to have 2 times 5 square roots of 3, which is going to be 10 square roots of 3. Then we've got 27. So the square root of 27 is 9 times 3. So that's 3 square roots of 3. So that brings me back here to plus 4 times 3 square roots of 3, which is 12 square roots of 3. And then the square root of 12, well, I know that's 4 times 3, so that's going to be minus 6 times 2 square roots of 3, which gives me negative 12 square roots of 3. So when I add these together, these two are opposites, so my final answer is 10 square roots of 3. Okay, so I still went too far, a little heavy-handed on that finger over there. And then that brings us to where we are multiplying now. So when we're multiplying, we're just distributing and then simplifying. So we're going to multiply and simplify. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 8 is the square root of 16, plus the square root of 2 times the square root of 18 is the square root of 36. Now we simplify. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 36 is 6, which gives us 10. We multiply here. The square root of 3x times the square root of 3x to the third is the square root of 9x to the fourth minus the square root of 15x. Now we simplify. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x to the fourth is x squared. No perfect squares there. There we go. And then we are FOILing. So when we FOIL, the square root of 5 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 15. Outsides minus the square root of 25. Insides plus the square root of 3x. Outsides minus the square root of 5x. Well, the square root of 25 is 5, so we have the square root of 15 minus 5 plus the square root of 3x minus the square root of 5x. That's it. Can't combine anything else. For the second problem there, they're asking us to take the square root of x plus the square root of 6 squared, which means we've got the square root of x plus the square root of 6 times the square root of x plus the square root of 6. So that's the square root of x squared plus the square root of 6x plus the square root of 6x plus the square root of 36. So when we simplify, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 6x plus the square root of 6x is 2, the square root of 6x plus 6. And there you go. Okay, so that brings us to, now we're going to solve. When you solve, you've got to undo the square root and then make sure, first off, that you have your square root all by itself. And then secondly, you want to make sure you don't get any extraneous solutions in your problem. So the first thing we've got to do here is get the square root part by itself. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So we have the square root of 2x plus 3 equals 7. And now we're going to square both sides. So when we square both sides, that undoes the square root. So we have 2x plus 3 equals 49. Subtract 3 from both sides, so 2x equals 46, and divide by 2, so x is 23. So then we check that. So 2 times 23, I'm just typing it in my calculator. I guess I could type it in this calculator. So I'm going to do 2 times 23 plus 3, and I want to take the square root of that, so second square root, and I want to add 4, and it's 11, and that's what I wanted it to be, so that's good. So let's try one of the ones below. So again, we got to start by getting our square roots by themselves. So we set our square roots up. So we add 1 to both sides, so we have the square root of x squared minus 5x equals 6. And then so that we can simplify, we got to square both sides. So that gives us x squared minus 5x equals 36. Now we solve, so we've got to get it equal to 0 because it's a quadratic. So now we're looking for factors of negative 36 that add up to give us negative 5, which would be x minus 9 and x plus 4. And since those equal 0, that means our solutions are x equals 9 and x equals 4, which is negative. So we want to check and see if both of those work. So I go to my calculator, and I'm typing in 9 squared minus 5 times 9, and then I want to take the square root of that and subtract 1. So that one worked. So now we're going to do negative 4 squared minus 5 times 4 negative something happened here. So we've got negative 4 squared minus 5 times, that's what happened, my 4 didn't. See, my 5, I didn't have the 5 typed in, times negative 4. And then I want to take the square root of that. And then subtract 1. And did that work? That worked. So that means both of these are going to be answers. Okay? Let me just pause here for a moment. Alright, and then the last one we're going to do is we're going to have to square both sides here. So let's do that. So we're going to square both sides. So that gives us 4 minus x equals, and then when we square this, we get x squared minus 2x minus 2x plus 4. Get everything equal to 0, so this side's going to be 0. We're going to have x squared. We're going to add an x, so negative 2 and negative 2 is negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3x. And we're going to subtract the 4, and bam. So we've got 0 equals x squared minus 3x. We have to solve that. So we factor out an x. So our solutions are x equals 0 and x equals negative 3. So we check that with our calculator. Just going to move it over here because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. So I've got 4 minus 0. I take the square root of that, and that's positive 2. But if I do 0 minus 2, that's negative 2. So this can't be an answer. So now let's check the other one. So if I do 4 minus 3 negative, something didn't type right, clear. So 4 minus 3 negative, and I take the square root. I got 2.65 whatever. And then if I do the other side, I've got negative 3 minus 2. And that's negative 5. That doesn't work. So neither of these are solutions. So this would have no solution. Okay? I'm not going to put word problems on the quiz for you this time. If you choose to do the word problems, like the answers for these will be available on the answer sheet that I'm posting. But as far as having to do those answers, there's no sweat. You don't have to do them. Okay? If you choose to, that's on you. So, hey, thanks for coming out.